Hello everyone, this is part 32 of What If Naruto Was Like the Sage of Six Paths, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Huge blasts of light rent apart the sky in a conflagration of color and noise as the awed population of one of Hai no Kuni's larger and more prosperous towns watched on, enraptured. Great, deafening cracks held their attentions as animals all around the area winced from the booming explosions high above, birds scattering to find somewhere quieter to roost. However, that went unnoticed to the celebrating citizens of the town, decked out in their fanciest and most colorful kimonos and yukatas as they moved through the bustling streets. Sparklers were held by running children as they dashed about, laughing and playing or trying out some of the many stall games that were brightly advertised along the streets. This was the scene that four teenagers, each around 16, entered into as they walked into the town. Three of them feeling incredibly underdressed in their more casual clothing. The boy at the lead was forced to dodge out of the way of a group of kids as they ran past, giggling and waving their colorful sparklers in the air. He was tall for his age, standing around 5'9" and actually appeared to be taller thanks to his long, spiky hair that traveled down to his shoulder blades as a scruffy, untidy ponytail. Another great flash of light from the fireworks above them lit him up, revealing the golden color of his unruly locks. The girl at the back of the group cursed quietly as one of the kids stood on her foot, her long, vivid red hair whipping around like a crimson waterfall as she turned to glare at him. Not that her angry look could even start to faze the young kids as they merrily ran off. She simply turned back with a slight scowl, muttering something to herself as the boy beside her, slightly taller than her but with equally long, raven black hair, smirked. Most people would say he had distinctly feminine features about him, like his small, cute nose and his elegant, slim frame that was accented by a deep blue kimono. The final person of the group simply observed the running youths with a soft, amused smile, easily stepping around them with the grace and poise only noble women or kanoiki could ever hope to possess. Her shoulder-length, messy green hair, the color of a pale mint leaf, flowed with her movements, highlighting her contrasting dark skin. A pair of sparkling orange eyes followed the movements of the children with a carefree expression as she turned back to her friends, a small smile continuing to light up her young features. It is quite the lively town. The boy at the lead just grinned slightly, leaning on the long and old-looking wooden shakuju he carried as he had a habit of doing. I think we caught it on a good day. The darker-haired boy just chuckled as he looked around at the cacophony of sights and sounds flooding their senses. You could say that Naruto. The blonde's grin only widened as he took a deep breath, enjoying the scent of various sweet foods lingering in the air, tantalizing his taste buds. It had been so long since they had had any kind of sweets, living off of what they could catch and gather for the past 3 years. Well, in any case, we should go find a hotel or an inn. We've been traveling for a while now and we should all get some rest. The redhead at the back of the group, having recovered from her small cursing fit, just threw an incredulous look the blonde's way as she snorted loudly. Yeah, as if Blondie. I've never gotten to experience one of these festival things before and they look like a good time. With that she smirked at the group before grabbing Haku's arm roughly. Now if you don't mind, I'll be borrowing here. See you at the hotel or whatever. With that she gave a nonchalant wave, casually and playfully flipping him off in what they knew to be a friendly, for her, gesture and walked off, pulling Haku along by his arm. Why am I the one that has to go with you? Tayuya just smirked up at Haku, somewhat annoyed by the difference in their height that 3 years had brought but hiding it much better than her younger self would have. Easy, I want some food and you have money. She raised an amused eyebrow at the ice wielder's impassive gaze as he allowed himself to be dragged along by the redhead. More than used to it by now. Get where I'm going with this, Haku-chan. The dark-haired Yuki merely sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly in defeat, which gave Tayuya a small grin of elation as she pumped her fist. Alright then, Dango awaits. Naruto could only watch with an amused smile as two of his closest friends walked off together, vanishing into the maelstrom of activity that was the festival. I think they need this. Naruto began walking as Fu naturally gravitated to his side, slightly less self-conscious now that their other friends were gone. Naruto just raised a blonde eyebrow, not bothering to turn to Fu as they walked, too taken in by all the wonderful things going on around them. Oh, he already had an idea of what Fu meant, but he enjoyed hearing things from the girl. Her opinions and thoughts were always important to him. Unfortunately, even 3 years had been unable to change the fact that Fu was a naturally introverted person, rarely speaking up unless she was either genuinely interested or it concerned her or a person she cared about, of which the list was very short. I don't imagine that any person in our group has ever experienced a festival before. I have read about them in many books, but never participated. She looked up at Naruto expectantly, but the blonde shook his head. During his time in Konoha, he had either been too young to understand festivals or had feared the intense looks of hatred and apathy he would get if he tried to join one. He imagined it was much the same with Taiuya and Haku, both of whom hadn't led lives that would have allowed him to experience such frivolities. Nobody in our group has ever truly had a normal childhood, trained from young ages to be weapons, fighters, or completely removed from normal society. She smiled softly as a small puppy ran past excitedly, barking enthusiastically as a young girl chased after it, just as happy as the little animal. It is nice to experience things like this, even if only for a short time. She blinked in surprise when she realized Naruto was no longer at her side, not having even felt him move away. I think you're right. She turned, spotting Naruto standing over by a large stall, its sign proudly advertising the fish catching that it was hosting. The blonde monk stood near to it, waving Fu over with an excited grin. The young Jinchuriki just paused before smiling in return, walking over to the blonde with an amused smile. Above them, fireworks continued to blast into the sky, lighting it up in a myriad of colors and sparkling patterns, drowning out any negative thoughts one could be having on such a joyous night. Ooh, colorful, aren't they? Two men stood atop a high ridge overlooking the village, the dark cloaks helping them blend in with the darkening night. It was only the occasional flash of green or blue that would light up their features as high above them fireworks cast their features into eerie, flickering shadows. The one that had spoken was a very large man with an intimidating build, but his features cast into shadow by the low shugegasa hat he wore, the small talismans and bells hanging off the edges jingling every time he moved his head. Why did we come here? His companion, a much smaller man with a softer and almost toneless voice, stood next to him, gazing at the village with an indiscernible expression. His dark eyes were impassive, uncaring even, and only held the barest flickers of interest at the exciting and enrapturing sights happening below them. He too wore a decorated shugegasa over his head, shadowing much of his features but revealing his rather pale skin. Oh come on now, we should get to kick back every so often, and a festival is the perfect way to do that. Some sake, maybe a few women. The smaller, slighter man sighed at the suggestive tone in his companion's voice. Even an emotionless guy like you should be able to appreciate that, right? The larger man turned, the expectant look in his beady eyes hidden by his hat, even though he was sure his friend would be able to spot it from his body language. Very well, but make it quick. A sharp, toothy grin made its way across the bigger man's face as he turned back to the village in front of them, rubbing his hands together excitedly. I knew it, even someone like you has to have fun once in a while. His eyes gained a devious glint as he spotted a group of women dressed in fine kimonos and yukatas moving through the packed streets, giggling and talking among one another as they expertly weaved through the throngs of people like true natives. Now then, shall we hit the casinos or enjoy something on the softer side? His partner stayed quiet, simply turning away from the larger man and walking off towards the town. The bigger man simply shrugged, his grin returning full force as he followed after his companion, his dark, high-collared wrap fluttering in the breeze. High above them another bright flash erupted across the sky, illuminating the large, puffy red clouds that decorated the black cloaks. This is strange, none of the games here seem particularly difficult. What is the point without challenge? Naruto just chuckled as he walked along beside Fu, each holding a slowly steaming stick of sweet-smelling dango as they moved through the throngs of festival-goers. I don't think the point is for them to be difficult, you are just supposed to have fun. He pointed to a young couple, around their age, that was standing in front of a ring toss stand. The boy had a determined look on his face as he tossed one ring after another, each one just narrowly missing its mark as it made little clattering sounds. The girl just stood to his side, a bright smile on her face as she cheered him on, finally erupting in a large cheer as the boy finally managed to snag one of the rings. See, they're just here to have fun. Fu watched on curiously as the stall's owner gave a toy the boy, who quickly passed it on to the girl. Her eyes widened slightly as the girl looked down shyly, a little blush staining her cheeks as she quickly and embarrassedly leaned forward and pecked the boy on the cheek, smiling softly to herself as she turned and walked off. The boy wasn't far behind her, a stupid grin on his face and a small blush of his own. Fu blinked once at the alien interaction before looking up at Naruto, noticing he was watching the couple move off as well. Could you win me something? Naruto paused for a moment, blinking in amazement at the timid, slightly confused tone to Fu's voice. He frowned, knowing that even without chakra Fu would easily be able to win any of these stall games, they were made for untrained children after all. However, he saw no reason to say anything on it as he allowed a grin to slip onto his face. Sure, come on. Fu was a little surprised when Naruto grabbed her by the hand and led her over to the nearest stall, a rubber ball scooping game. The stall owner smiled congenially at the just another teenage couple he saw and quickly handed Naruto a small stack of 3 simply paper scoops. Naruto could have easily channeled chakra through the paper, reinforcing it and even waterproofing it, but he was naturally honest by nature, so just decided to take the game for what it was. He grabbed one of the offered bowls and after a moment of thought dipped the little scoop into the water, quickly flicking up one of the balls into the bowl without even breaking the scoop. The stall owner seemed a little surprised by how easily he had done it, but that was nothing compared to when Naruto repeated the process 3 more times before the paper finally broke. Wow, that's pretty impressive, kid. You come to festivals often then? Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as he looked at the other scoops he still had left. No, it's actually my first time. The stall owner just smiled at the perceived young couple as he gestured to the small shelf of prizes at the back on the stand. Well then, the lucky beginner gets to pick one of those prizes. Naruto quickly saw the one he wanted to get, a white plush wolf with red markings across its body and what appeared to be a small halo of fire skulled to its back. It was a cartoonish representation of the goddess Amaterasu that had become popular as of late with artists. Hey, you should be more careful, Gaki, you only get a few of these. Naruto's eyebrow rose a little at the blue skin of the man offering the scoops back to him as well as the black nail polish on his hands. He also wore an ornate yellow ring that had the kanji for south on his left ring finger, but anything else about the man was hidden beneath his high-collared black cloak and face shadowing Shugegasa. Thank you. He couldn't see it through the shadows cast by the man's hat, but he could almost feel the vicious grin the blue-skinned man was giving him. Hey, no problem, kid. With that, the large, imposing man stood back up, letting Naruto notice that he had a companion dressed in similarly concealing attire. However, more frightening was the fact that Naruto could practically feel the enormous chakra emanating off of both of them even without his water sensing ability. Be more careful next time. Naruto ignored the slightly mocking tone as the enormous man walked off, his smaller, quieter partner following after him without a word, but not before pausing to look at Naruto one last time. Are you okay, Naruto? The blonde shook his head quickly as he realized he had been staring after the two, enraptured by the chakra they just casually gave off, even if the smaller one was hiding his own better. He looked around to Fu, who had been tugging lightly on his robe's sleeve, also staring after the two men. We should go find Tayuya and Haku, get some rooms for the night before they're all booked up. Fu paused, feeling as though Naruto was leaving something out, but ignored that as she nodded slowly. Down the street, the 2 cloaked men continued to casually stroll through the crowds, the smaller opting to weave through the people like a ghost, never touching anyone, while the larger man practically parted the crowds with his mere presence. The more observant and less drunken festival goers would have noticed that the enormous bandage-wrapped object on the man's back seemed to be moving slightly, a clicking, groaning sound like scales rubbing together occasionally sounding from beneath the white wrappings. Oh, is that right? The large, blue-skinned man gained an amused smirk as he spared a glance at his partner who was looking ahead expressionlessly. Samehada has some interesting information for us, what do you think? Itachi. The younger man said nothing for a few moments as they kept walking before finally looking up at his partner. For the briefest of moments, 2 deep red eyes peered out of the shadows cast on his face like some eerie Cheshire cat. Go on, kiss him. You know, all these people really don't make tracking the Gaki's chakra any easier. You should give me more credit, Itachi. Kisum waited for a reply from his stoic comrade as they made their way through the various crowds of people. The festival was beginning to wind down as people either flocked to their homes or their hotels. Only the teens and couples that wanted to preserve the romantic night air stayed out as the moon began to reach its zenith in the sky. But you are still able to track him. Kisum just sighed. Their Itachi went again with his monotone, disinterested voice. It was like speaking to an only mildly talkative rock that had amazing prowess as a shinobi. Yeah, once Samehada's got the scent, she's better than any ninkin. Although who would have thought we'd be the first to find our Jinchuriki Itachi? The younger Uchiha made no indication he had heard his larger, more vicious partner as the trail began to lead him towards a hotel near the fringes of the town. It does seem unlikely considering the Kyubi Jinchuriki and the Nanabi Jinchuriki are the only ones leader Sama was unable to locate. Kisum just gave his shark-like grin as he rubbed his hands together excitedly. All the better for us, partner. Kakazu is going to be annoyed that we got ours first. Under all that talk of money, I can tell he's the competitive type. The shark-emulating man chuckled to himself as they began to ascend the steps to the balcony of the second-floor rooms. Must be why he keeps all his partners by accident, the former Kirinin ended his statement with air quotes. Although I guess that's not a problem now with that weird new guy. Itachi ignored his partner's ramblings as they finally came to a stop in front of one of the rooms. Is this it? Kisum halted mid-sentence before nodding, becoming more professional but never losing the toothy grin. Itachi once again ignored his more enthusiastic partner as he quickly rapped on the door 3 times, only showing marginal surprise as it almost instantly opened, revealing a teen boy with bright spiky hair and a soft smile. It was strange as Itachi remembered when he had been much younger, when he was still in the ANBU, seeing this same boy that could barely be higher than his waist. Now they were around the same height. Naruto Uzumaki. None of his surprise or thoughtfulness made it into his even, steady voice, and Naruto's smile widened slightly for it. It almost reminded the young monk of a male version of Fu. Yes, how could I help you? Again both men were a little perturbed by the calm, uncaring demeanor the boy had and how easily he gave away his idini. After all, this had been one of the Jinchuriki even Zetsu had been unable to track. They had simply assumed he was in hiding. There was also the fact that 2 S-class shinobi were standing in front of him, a large amount of their chakra saturating the air, and he was simply looking at them with curiosity and that same gentle smile. Oh good, we got the right one, that makes things a lot easier. Naruto turned to the larger of the 2 men, his eyebrow rising a little. You know, it's a little strange talking like this out in the corridor. Why don't you come in? You've obviously been traveling for some time. He was referring to the slight layer of dust and dirt that had accumulated along the bottom of their cloaks as well as the generally disheveled appearance of the clothing. I have tea. Finally Itachi allowed his eyebrow to quirk up slightly, the oddness of the situation finally getting to him. I'm afraid we don't have time for that, Naruto-kun, you will have to be coming with us now. To both men's great surprise, Naruto simply blew air between his teeth in amusement, waving his hand nonchalantly and walking back into the room. Nonsense. If there is one thing my master taught me for certain, it is that there is always time for tea. The 2 cloaked men were left gaping, in Kisum's case quite literally, in the hallway as they watched the younger blonde move back into the hotel room. After a moment's pause, Kisum just shrugged, a somewhat bewildered expression on his face as he turned to his shorter companion. Actually, some tea sounds pretty good, not like we're on a time limit or something. Didn't Leader Sama say something about sealing the Kyubi last anyway? When all he received was the silence of the hallway as an answer, he realized that Itachi had already moved past him into the room and was in the process of seating himself down on the couch opposite the blonde, a small wooden table between them. Hey, that was rude, Itachi. The dark-haired Uchiha ignored his partner as the larger man walked into the room, throwing himself back onto the couch beside him and grabbing one of the steaming cups laid out, almost as if the blonde had been expecting company. Hey Gaki, where's that cute girl you were walking around with earlier? The blue-skinned shinobi was looking around the hotel room, noticing the obvious lack of anybody else. Oh, she's about somewhere. Neither men reacted visibly to the vague comment but were still a little unnerved with the ease with which Naruto could shrug off their oppressive chakra combined. Finally, after Naruto had poured 2 more cups for himself and Itachi, he looked up, a bright smile on his face. So what can I help you with? Finally, Unable to take the absurdity of the situation anymore, Kisum burst out laughing, filling the quiet room with his chuckles as he nudged his partner with his elbow. Man Itachi, can you imagine how easy this whole thing's gonna be if all the Jinchuriki are as helpful as the Gaki here? Distracted by his partner's obnoxious laughter, Itachi missed the slight hardening of Naruto's eyes, which the blonde quickly quashed. Now what could you two want with the Jinchuriki? Naruto's voice held sincere curiosity as he gazed calmly at the two new nin over his steaming cup, blowing on it causally. That is unimportant, Naruto-kun. All you need to know is that you will be coming with us, one way or the other. Far from the defensive or hostile look Itachi had been expecting from the Kyuubi vessel, Naruto only gained a slight hint of mirth to his body language. For the first time, Itachi seemed to notice that Naruto seemed to be actively squinting his eyes for some reason, as if trying to hide his eyes from them. Could I ask where? Itachi of Konoha and Kisum of Kiri. Or should that be formally? Again the boy spoke with a surprising nonchalance as he sipped at his tea. For two S-ranked and highly feared missing nin, it was very, very strange. You know of us. Kisum seemed amused, and it showed through his voice. He found this entire situation just hilarious. In the end it meant very little to him just how they caught the Jinchuriki. It was going to end the same anyway, with them slung over Samehada like a bindle on a stick. Of course, few from Konoha don't know of the prodigy Itachi Uchiha. Genin at 7, Chunin at 10, Anbu captain at 13, flawless mission record and S of his clan. The young monk spoke the entire list of achievements like they were all positives before turning to Kisum. I also had the privilege of traveling through Mizuno Kuni for some time. I heard a lot about Kisum Hoshigaki, monster of the mist and wielder of the legendary blade Samehada. It was true, however his name was usually whispered in hushed tones like he was some kind of bogeyman. He was a truly feared figure in Kiri. A small smirk tugged at the edges of Naruto's lips as he met the former Kiri shinobi's beady eyes. I actually find your other nickname the most amusing, the tailless-tailed beast. He chuckled absently as he took another sip of his drink, something Chukaku had once told him enabled the old head monk to take control and set the pace of any conversation. You know, I know somebody who would be very disgruntled with you having that name, insulted even. Kisum only returned the smirk as he leant forward, a challenging look entering his eyes. Oh really? Who? Naruto only smiled as he took another long sip of his drink, choosing not to answer. As hospitable as you have been, Naruto-kun, I must insist that you come with us now. Naruto glanced over at the previously quiet Uchiha, noticing with some amusement that the dark-haired man had completely emptied his cup. Now, no need to be hasty. Maybe you could answer a few questions of mine before we go, it's only fair after all. Itachi paused, narrowing his eyes at the blonde before being rudely elbowed in the side by his partner. I'll go on, Itachi, humor the kid, he's kind of grown on me and it's not like it'll matter in the end. Itachi thought about glaring at his partner but thought better of it. It wasn't like it would affect the chakra powerhouse much anyway. Fine, what would you like to know? Naruto smiled congenially as he finally set his cup down, sighing in contentment at the pleasant taste still lingering on his tongue. What does your organization want with the Bayou? Kisum chuckled again at the blunt question that was offered up so casually it was like Naruto was talking about the weather while Itachi's gaze only narrowed further. What makes you suspect we are part of a group? Naruto only tilted his head innocently. The blonde thought about messing with the two further and playing the fool but figured answers were more important than the amusement. The matching cloaks and the goal that would require far more resources than two missing nins such as yourselves would be able to muster, even as powerful as you are. Itachi absorbed the observation before nodding once concedingly. You are far shrewder than I had thought you would be. Naruto leaned forward at that, unknowingly mirroring how Kisum had appeared earlier as an amused smile appeared on his features. Oh, how did you expect me to be? Like my younger self, full of energy and naivety, shouting out an empty promise over a far-fetched dream. The blonde looked up at that seemingly in thought before chuckling himself, making Itachi realize that had they not been on opposite sides of this conflict he and Kisum would have probably gotten along. I suppose you would only be half right then, but in any case back to my question. Itachi noticed the change in the boy's posture as he said that, sitting up straighter and more alert. Our goal is peace. There was silence in the room as Naruto mulled over his words. His face becoming indecipherable in an unknowingly perfect replication of Fuu's stoic facade. And you would use the Bayou to achieve this. Itachi nodded again, noting that Kisame seemed to be getting more agitated now as the conversation became less amusing and interesting for him. Naruto simply sat in silence again, thinking over what the older Uchiha had told him before nodding once. Then I think that's all I need to know, thank you. And with that, without so much as a goodbye or any kind of warning, the blonde burst into a cloud of smoke, widening Itachi and Kisame's eyes. A shadow clone. Kisame had a particularly annoyed expression on his face as he swiped away the smoke from his face, coughing slightly thanks to the enclosed space they were in. That tricky brat, why didn't you see that Itachi? The Uchiha merely gazed at the spot Naruto was sitting in, or at least his clone had, with an impassive expression. The shadow clone had identical chakra to the original, this one gave no sign that he was a clone. Can you still track him? Kisame shook his head. The blonde was already out of range of them and Samehada hadn't bothered to look while they were talking, thinking the target was right in front of them. Then we must go inform Leader Sama of this, he needs to know the Kyuubi Jinchuriki has resurfaced. Kisame just grunted as he stood up, disgruntled at not being able to have his fun after all. Shame that we couldn't even get a read on his skills though, would have been useful for the next time we ran into the Gaki. Itachi shook his head slowly as they left the hotel room, walking out into the now much quieter night air. On the contrary, even through his clone I was able to tell Naruto-kun had incredible reserves, much larger than your own. That made Kisame raise an eyebrow until Samehada's clicking on his back confirmed Itachi's observation. The sentient sword seemed extra excited about the monk's chakra for some reason. There was something else too. I was only able to briefly glimpse him with my Sharingan, but any genjutsu I tried to cast. It was almost as if he didn't notice they were there. Kisame shrugged, the huge sword on his back shifting with the movement. That's good, right? Itachi shook his head again, a disturbed look marring his normally stoic features. No, it was more like the genjutsu had no affect on him whatsoever. For somebody who specialized in illusions and subterfuge like Itachi, that was a frightening prospect to face in an enemy. But that isn't the most interesting thing. That made Kisame raise an eyebrow as he turned to his partner. Oh, Itachi still had that disturbed look on his face. If what he thought was true, then the consequences for their mission and the goal were staggering. The chakra flow to his eyes was strange, almost like my own. Kisame's eyes widened, knowing precisely what that meant. The brat has a dojutsu. Itachi nodded slowly, it was only conjecture, but still. Yes, however the way the chakra moved, so steadily and constantly in such great amounts. Another frown marred his pale features. I have only ever seen it in one other person. Kisame seemed excited again, the mystery surrounding their target intriguing him. Who? That was when Itachi seemed most troubled, looking at the ground in silence as if searching for some other possible answer. Leader Sama. For the third time in his life, Naruto found himself walking through the quiet and misty fog of Mizu no Kuni. The frigid, wet air clung to his body and clothes like a second skin in a familiar and uncomfortable film. He wouldn't say it out loud, but he knew that even as much as he had allowed himself to get over Shizuku's death, being here, in the country where he saw her made him melancholic. He deftly moved around the various roots and plants that might have tripped him up as he walked through the forest, lost in his own thoughts until a voice seeped into his peace. So kid, what's your business with Utakata anyway? Naruto watched the taller, brawnier man that until now had seen fit to simply walk behind him in silence, comfortable in the presence of an entire squad of Kirianbu. I came to warn him of a group hunting the Jinchuriki. The man, Naruto had been informed his name was Tsurugi, grunted before returning to an uneasy silence. The blonde found it a little strange that throughout his entire time working and fighting with the rebels he had never once met this man. He was now the commander of the Anbu in Kiri, working directly under Ao himself. He guessed it was because while Naruto had been protecting supplies, this man had been behind enemy lines, sabotaging and The reason they were now walking through a small forest near the south of Mizu no Kuni was simple. There had been a lot of sightings of a tall, thin man using strange bubble-oriented ninjutsu in the area. After finding out that there was a group actually hunting the Jinchuriki, Naruto had felt he should at least warn his fellow containers. They had been dealt a hard hand in life already and they did not need any more suffering from this group, whoever they were. However, considering the fact that most of the Jinchuriki were actually no longer such and Naruto knew Kiribi was very strong, he felt the Rokubi Jinchuriki was the first he should warn. Unfortunately, he had no idea who that was or where they could be. He just considered himself lucky that he had a personal fount of knowledge named Fu traveling with him, or they wouldn't have even gotten this far. Unfortunately, the mint-haired girl didn't know exactly who the Jinchuriki was. That information was kept strictly secret by the villagers, but she knew at least that Kiri was the last person in possession of the creature. Her carers had wanted her prepared in the event a major village ever decided to attack Takagakure and brought the force of their own Jinchuriki to play. From there it had been a matter of traveling to Kirigakure, constantly keeping watch for any sign that Kisame or Itachi, or anybody else wearing that black cloak with red clouds, was following them. Mei had been surprisingly helpful for them, as it turned out that they weren't the only ones searching for the Rokubi Jinchuriki, a man named Utakata. In fact, it was currently an Anbu directive to look out for anyone bearing his description, thus the reason Naruto and his friends were currently traveling with an entire squad of them. Mei had been hoping that with the loss of the Sanbi with Yagura's death, Kiri could recoup some of their lost power with their other Jinchuriki. She had hoped that once word reached the elusive man that the rebellion was over, he would come back to them, no longer having to fear the hunter Nin after him. However, when no such thing happened after a year, she had begun to actively search him out. Unfortunately for them, years of evading and being chased by Yagura's hunter Nin hadn't exactly made Utakata all that respondent to Kiri's shinobi, it had also made him exceptionally difficult to find. I still don't understand why a brat like you was assigned to this mission. You aren't even a shinobi. It's insulting that an entire squad of Anbu is having to play babysitter to a bunch of teens, barely older than 16. From the rear of the group, Tayuya flipped the man the bird as she walked, having been idly complaining about the moisture in the air making her usually straight hair frizz out. It was an uncharacteristically unkanoiki thing for her to say, but she had little else to talk about, and annoying Haku with pointless chatter was like a hobby for her. I'm 18 UA. Tsurugi just grumbled to himself, rubbing the scar that passed downwards through his left eye absently. I don't care if you're 30, you aren't Kirigakure shinobi. Naruto chuckled slightly, turning and pointing the Anbu that had thought he was well hidden in the trees to their right. He has a fire affinity. Tsurugi blinked as he looked up at where Naruto was pointing, easily picking out his squad member on a high branch that seemed a little shocked he had been found out so easily. However, Naruto didn't wait for a response from the grizzled Anbu commander, flicking his hand out again and pointing to another seemingly empty space to their left. Water affinity with a small secondary affinity to lightning. At that, Tsurugi raised an eyebrow, but it seemed Naruto wasn't finished as he wheeled again, pointing 3 times in quick succession. Earth and water, earth, and another water affinity, a strong one. Tsurugi quickly verified that there were indeed Anbu stationed where Naruto had been pointing before raising an eyebrow. So you're a censor. He already knew that the boy had been correct in his assertions. Tsurugi prided himself on knowing his Anbu intimately, abilities and affinities included. However, the ability to not only sense people, but the nature of the chakra too was a rare ability indeed. It suddenly made sense to him why Naruto had been placed with him. For a sensor of his ability, it would be easy to pick out a Jinchuriki if they got close enough. It was hard to escape a sensor on your trail, harder still when they were backed up by an entire squad of Anbu. That doesn't really help us find Utakata though. Naruto just smirked at that, pointing off in another random direction after briefly closing his eyes in concentration. Tsurugi was almost about to scoff, seeing as there was no Anbu in the direction he was pointing, but Naruto beat him to it. About 2 kilometers that way is a small camp of Anbu Black Ops, 5 men and a woman, 3 are sleeping while the others are awake and forming a perimeter. This time Tsurugi's frown was more pronounced. He knew for a fact that information was correct. He had issued orders to such a squad this morning. So you're a powerful censor. Tsurugi scrutinized the young blonde for a moment. His abilities as a censor sounded suspiciously similar to what Yagura had been known for. Tsurugi would know too, as he had still been an Anbu captain before the rebellion had broken out, and he knew a lot about the former Mizukage. What's your range? Naruto looked up for a moment, trying to recall the furthest he had ever tried to stretch out his water sensing without giving himself a bad headache. Around 3 kilometers if I stand still, but it gets blurry after 2 kilometers and all I get is the chakra signatures themselves. Tsurugi raised an eyebrow at the all, but said nothing as the group continued on. Even with the addition of a powerful sensory type, he didn't fancy their chances too much. Utakata had been on the run far too long and hid himself far too well for him to be caught by anything less than a powerful S-ranked shinobi. In a small fishing village on the southernmost peninsula of the main island of Mizu no Kuni, a man sat on a cliff overlooking the sea. In the distance he could spot another small island shrouded in early morning fog and was gazing at it disinterestedly. A small bubble flew up from the oddly shaped pipe he had held against his mouth, and anybody sensitive to that sort of thing would have noticed it, and the fluid it held was saturated with a potent chakra. He watched the shiny sphere with a bit of curiosity for a moment to see which way the wind would take it, only seeing his warped and discolored features in the filmy bubble. "Ha! Well, you finally found me. I suppose it was only a matter of time in the end." The crunch of gravel behind him gave away his pursuers' presences, not to mention the man could feel the immense chakra they had. He stood up languidly, keeping his pipe on hand just in case as he turned to the people behind him, raising his eyebrow at their appearance. It's strange for the Mizukage to use shinobi outside of the Kiri forces, after all blonde is an uncommon hair color in this country. He frowned as the people before him stayed quiet, his hand twitching around his pipe reflexively. "The Mizukage sent you to take me back, right?" The man in front of him grinned in response, reaching into his cloak with both hands in an action that put Utakata on edge. "Oh no, I just wanted to show you something, The thin Jinchuriki raised an eyebrow as he tensed his body. This wasn't what he had been expecting. "What?" The man seemed to grin as he relished the question, his hand re-emerging from his cloak, seemingly empty. "My art. Okay, now I'm officially bored." Tayuya groaned loudly as she flopped back on the large boulder she had been resting on, absently blowing a large tuft of hair away from her face. The four of them were stood in a small clearing outside a town where they had received reports of a man matching Utakata's description. Tsurugi and his Anbu had gone ahead to check it out, telling the civilians to stay where they were and not interfere with Kiri's operation. "It was rather rude of him to simply leave us here. We could have at least gone into the village." Naruto raised an eyebrow from where he was comfortably sat against the thick trunk of a tree. It was rare to hear Tayuya and Haku agree over anything so easily. "It makes sense, we wouldn't want to overwhelm him with a load of people he doesn't know. We just want to talk after all, not scare him off." Tayuya just groaned pathetically again as she gently banged her head against the rock repeatedly in a show of frustration. "Yeah, but then why's he taken that entire Anbu squad with him?" Naruto simply responded by suddenly vanishing from view, becoming invisible almost instantly. "Because if they do their jobs, Utakata will never even see them." Tayuya simply snorted at that as Naruto faded back into the visible spectrum like he had appeared from some other dimension. "Yeah, sounds about right. Offer to talk openly but have a few hidden knives poised to strike when they say no." The blonde did sigh at that. It was the unfortunate truth of the shinobi world. Trust only went as far as you could reach with your blade. It shouldn't come to that, but all we need to do is deliver a warning. Whether or not Utakata heeds it or accepts Kirigaku's offer is up to him. Tayuya chuckled derisively again as she leaned back up in a lazy flopping motion that had her long hair whipping about her face again. Naruto never understood why she didn't see it, but he had to admit that long red hair appealed to him somewhat, although he couldn't explain why. "Hey, what's really the point though? These Red Cloud guys want to get all the Jinchuriki right. That means they're after the Bayou, but you're the container for 6 of them, so they have to get you first." The redhead snorted into her hand with an amused smirk. "Honestly, it makes me feel a little sorry for them. I know how powerful you are." Naruto smiled a little at the rare compliment from the volatile girl before frowning. "It doesn't matter if this group's goal is successful or not. I made a promise to the Bayou that I would help them find their peace, all of them. If they wish to use the Bijuu's power, taking it by force for whatever plan they have in mind, then naturally we will come into conflict. But if I can keep the 2 remaining Jinchuriki out of it, then I will, for the sake of their Bayou." Tayuya blinked once at the sheer determination behind Naruto's words before sighing and offering a tired smirk. "Hey, if this whole world peace thing of yours doesn't work out, you should go into public speaking, or maybe therapy. You'd help a lot of those whiny F with the pansy problems." Naruto just grinned back at her. He could always count on his foul-mouthed friend to make light of almost any situation. "Anyway, However, Tayuya was see-off as Naruto raised a hand at the exact moment they were joined in the clearing by the Anbu squad and Tsurugi, his white porcelain mask with two tiger stripe-like red marks covering his face. Hey, took you long enough, eh? We've been waiting here for. However, once again she was see-off by Naruto as he held a hand up. She was about to round on him for it before noticing the steely look in his eye as he stared at Tsurugi. Don't bother, Tayuya, these aren't the ANBU, they're fakes. He turned to a seemingly random part of the clearing, his eyes becoming narrower and deathly serious. Isn't that right? The group, not having sensed anything or anybody approaching except the ANBU, weren't prepared as something jumped out of the darkness offered by the trees. It might have been a man, but he was horribly hunched over and the majority of his body was covered in a very recognizable black cloak with red puffy clouds. Not exactly. These are the very same Anbu, I merely improved them. The voice was deep and gravely, almost distorted as if it did not properly belong to the owner. But to be found out so easily when I went to the trouble of masking the changes is interesting. It seemed Itachi was right when he informed us not to underestimate you, QB Jinchuriki. Naruto narrowed his eyes, slowly putting the pieces together from the man-thing's words and what he could see of the ANBU, standing there motionlessly. What did you do to them? It was odd, like Gaara he now saw a thin film of chakra covering each of the ANBU, preventing him from seeing anything inside them. Not only that, but there was a thin string of chakra emerging from various parts of their bee, all connected to the man-thing who was similarly covered in a layer of chakra. They were almost like the strings of a puppet. Like I said, I improved them, made them eternal, allowed their visage to last forever. They are not as perfect as my usual works, but I am at least proud of them considering the minimal time and effort I placed into each. As one, the Anbu operatives removed their masks, making all 14s widen their eyes in horror and amazement save Naruto, who was now beginning to visibly tremble with suppressed rage. Each man and woman now bore an eternal, sickening grin, parts of their face interlocking like life-sized puppets. Their eyes were permanently wide and glassy, locked forever on a creepy, unblinking stare. You would there be in such a way? His thoughts were thrown back to Orochimaru, how he raised Shizuku simply to use her as psychological warfare on him. You know nothing, boy, do you canvas when you fill its frame with priceless art. I give these men a taste of immortality, an art that lasts the test of time, and you call it You are merely an ignorant child. However, you needn't worry, I am not here for you, QB Jinchuriki. You need only be delayed while my foolish partner deals with the Rokubi. Naruto calmed the shaking in his hands, now clenched into tight fists that had his knuckles turning white. Tayuya, Haku, Fu, I need you to go and help Utakata. He knew they would be fine. With luck, Fu would recognize the man's partner, giving him a much easier fight. It would take an extremely powerful opponent to defeat all three of them at once, especially with another Jinchuriki with them. Fu seemed about to object, but she hesitated as she noticed the cold stare he was giving the man-thing controlling the former Anbu. A small part of her thought this was how he must have appeared facing down Yagura, and the thought almost frightened her. Back then Naruto had Ka Jinchuriki cage thanks to his rage. That was 3 years ago, and the thought of what he could do now, if he truly released himself, was honestly terrifying. Right. In an instant the three dashed off towards the village. However, it seemed the puppeteer had other ideas as the chakra threads twitched. What makes you think I will allow you to leave? 5 of the Anbu puppets immediately moved to intercept the 3 teens who looked about ready to turn and counter. However, the need never arose as almost immediately the ground around them burst into sand that reached up with a mind of its own to wrap around the puppets and crush them without a second thought. It pained Naruto to so indifferently crush the former Kiri shinobi, however, considering what they had become, it seemed like a mercy to them. Whatever the case, it worked, and the 3 teens had the time to escape, dashing off into the trees. That was foolish of you, boy. Do you really think you can face a shinobi of my caliber by yourself? Naruto didn't give the reaction the man was expecting as the trembling in his hands stopped, a smile spreading over his face. I don't need to defeat you. I only need to delay you until my friends deal with your partner. The puppeteer remained unmoved, although it may have had to do with the strip of black cloth hanging in front of his mouth. So you think I will merely stand here as we wait for either of our companions to deal with the other? Do you really have such confidence in those mere teens to deal with an S-ranked shinobi like myself? Naruto's smile grew a little as the two powerful men stood opposite one another, neither making a move to initiate a fight. I do. His response was a small grunt from the man as Naruto began to see the chakra threads connected to the remaining Anbu puppets, Tsurugi included, move and writhe like thin, glowing snakes. I'm afraid I will have to disappoint you then. I despise the thought of merely waiting for my foolish partner. Knowing him, he will make some grand gesture and idiotic speech, and that will keep me waiting. The man's and cruel eyes narrowed as the patterns of the chakra thread movement became more complex. I hate to be kept waiting. The chakra threads suddenly moved in a strange, ethereal dance that Naruto had to admit was incredibly impressive as the puppet Anbu suddenly leapt forward. Without so much as a hand gesture, sand once again came to Naruto's call as it leapt from the ground, aiming to ensnare the transformed shinobi. However, the puppeteer seemed more than prepared this time as two of the puppets suddenly appeared in front of the others. As soon as the gaseous substance that Naruto could see was lightly interspersed with chakra made contact with the sand, he felt his ability to control it suddenly taken away. It was like each individual sand grain was suddenly sticking to the ones next to it, bonding the entire cloud together and rendering Naruto's ability to manipulate it null. Do you like it? I had originally intended to use that aerosol adhesive against the Ichibi Jinchuriki when he was located, however, considering you seem to share his abilities, an oddity I must say by the way, it will suffice. Naruto blinked in surprise at how easily this man had rendered one of his most powerful abilities completely void. He didn't get a lot of time to think on it though, as the remaining puppets darted around the frozen cod of sand. They hovered along the ground at frightening speed as the puppeteer expertly controlled them, as if gravity held no sway over their bee. Naruto saw fit to remind them they were not exempt from gravity's influence as he raised a single hand. Shinra Tensei. The puppeteer's eyes only had time to marginally widen at the name of the technique before four of the five puppets suddenly met an invisible wall of force. There was too little time for the man-thing to withdraw them before they were all sent flying back, into the trees and ground in sprays of broken wood, thankfully. In the Newton's shock, Naruto was able to drop a long, sturdy black rod from his sleeve, grab it and suddenly throw it all in one smooth motion. The chakra rod flew true and impaled the last remaining puppet through what would have been its heart had the organ not been coldly ripped out to be replaced by machinery and seals. The rod itself only lodged halfway into the sturdy wood, or whatever material these abominations were made from, but it was enough. The chakra-disrupting effect of the rod immediately kicked in, letting the puppet slump limply to the ground as the puppeteer lost his ability to control it. The entire encounter had happened in less than a few seconds, but already both opponents had learned a great deal about the other. Remarkable. Naruto turned to see the puppeteer gazing at him with curious, glassy eyes that stared at him unblinkingly like he was some piece of complex machinery he needed to figure out. So you do possess the Rinnegan, that is truly fascinating. That rang alarm bells in Naruto's mind. This man could not have seen his eyes yet, and he didn't remember showing during his conversation with Itachi or Kisame. How could he possibly recognize what should have been an extinct dojutsu purely from the skills he had displayed? Incredible, you will be my greatest masterpiece, a puppet like no other as I wield the power of the Sage of the Six Paths at my fingertips. I can promise you that once Akatsuki is done with your body, only the utmost time and care will go into reforming you into the perfect work of art. Naruto grimaced at that, glancing around to make absolutely sure that all of the puppets were irreparably broken. Should I feel honored by that? He took the lack of response from the man to mean he was planning his next move, meaning he should be wary. Sir Akatsuki, that is the name of the organization hunting the Bayou. That at least explains the clouds. But I feel a more personal name would be apt in this situation. If you like, I'll start. He inclined his head in a mockery of politeness as the puppeteer continued to watch him coldly. Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune at your service, but I assume you already knew that. The man-thing's head tilted slightly, almost in a show of amusement, but was gone as soon as it appeared. I suppose it is only apt that you know the name of the artist that will turn you into the finest work of art ever seen. I am Sasori no Akasuna, former shinobi of Sunagakure no Sato. Naruto struggled to put a face to that name for a moment, but nothing came to mind. Fu was the walking shinobi encyclopedia, not him. However, the fact he was from Sunagakure at least confirmed he was definitely a puppeteer, a dangerous art if wielded by a skilled practitioner. You won't get that far. Despite the man's features not changing at all, Naruto could feel his mocking smile from beneath that thin strip of cloth. We'll see. It came so suddenly Naruto didn't even manage to bring his hand up all the way. It was pure luck that none of the myriad of senbon that suddenly came shooting from Sasori's mouth didn't hit him. It was like they were all spring-loaded inside the puppeteer's body. He was just fortunate that the Shinra tensei he did fire off managed to divert enough of the lethal metal needles so that they in turn threw the others off course. However, in Naruto's confusion, Sasori wasn't sitting idle, as he quickly proved. I'm afraid you are 20 years too early to be challenging me, boy. I will show you the difference in our ability. Through the cloud of smoke that had been kicked up by both of their techniques, a thin, tail-like metal blade suddenly through the air, aiming to impale Naruto through the middle. Naruto managed to throw up an arm to counter it by batting it away by the flat side of the blade, but almost as soon as he did, it twisted around like it was a true tail, back around to bisect him down the middle. He dived backward, throwing up a wall of sand to cover his escape. However, the razor-sharp tail see through the earth wall like it was barely there. Come now, make this all at least worthwhile. Show me something so I don't get tired of waiting for you to fall. I would like to know the abilities of my next puppet before I have to strip you open. Naruto grimaced again as the cloud of smoke finally dissipated, revealing Sasori to still just be standing, or maybe crouching, there with the metal tail-like appendage swaying slowly behind him like his namesake would suggest. He looked down at his fingers, noticing a slight purple film over them from where he had touched the tail blade. So you noticed? Yes, that's a particularly nasty blend of mine, still experimental, but I'm sure you will be happy to test it out for me. Naruto wiped off the dangerous liquid on his robes before looking up, widening his eyes when he realized Sasori's tail was nowhere to be seen. Just in time too, as it burst out from the ground behind him, through the air with an audible whine. Sasori just grunted when it met resistance, just not the type he had been expecting. From Naruto's back, from beneath his robes, emerged a blade very similar to Sasori's own, however his was serrated and not dripping with debilitating Fascinating, you already display certain characteristics of a puppet. Opening you up and finding out your every secret will be just fascinating. Naruto for his part seemed just as surprised as his apparent tail blade fended off Sasori's, the gleaming metal of each sparking as the smooth blade of the puppeteer failed to gain any ground on Naruto's serrated one. Finally Sasori's retreated before Naruto had time to recoup and consider something else while the man's main method of attack was occupied. Almost instantly Naruto's blade retracted, taking the cold sensation with it as it merged back into normal flesh. Naruto may have felt discomforted by the alienating feeling of the Asura path, but he couldn't deny its versatility. I already told you, you won't get the chance. Again Naruto could feel the calculating, eyes observing him coldly. I have yet to see anything that would suggest that. Naruto didn't give him a chance to do anything though, as he preemptively raised both of his hands. Shinra Tensei. He almost breathed a sigh of relief as he saw the gravitational blast hit Sasori's on with nothing coming out to block it or try to divert it. However, he was shocked when Sasori barely moved at all. What did happen though was his cloak had been blown off, revealing the horrific figure underneath. It appeared to be a large, dark-skinned man with his hair pulled into dreadlocks, crouched down on all fours. However, his skin was unnaturally shiny and smooth while his joints were segmented. A puppet. The jointed mouth of the thing moved in a mockery of human speech as it shifted into a cruel smirk. Yes, Hiriko, one of my favorites. It eliminates the problem all puppeteers face when it comes to defending themselves. Instead of hiding behind my puppets like most I hide inside them instead. Ingenious, no. The more calculating side of Naruto was slightly impressed at the idea, however the human part of him was disgusted. This man was hiding inside what used to be a human. And now he could see the thing. He realized why his Deva Path's attack had no effect. Spikes had emerged from its feet and hand, locking it place on the ground. You have to understand, QB Jinchuriki, I am a puppeteer. While other shinobi train, we instead prepare. The more a puppeteer prepares for every possible outcome, the better they are. The sickening human puppet crouched down lower as the blade, which was now revealed to emerge from the mouth of some twisted Hanya mask on its back, swayed entrancingly. And I am the best puppet master in the world. Naruto found himself grimacing internally once again. It seemed none of his tricks or abilities would work a second time on this man. Luckily he had a lot of them. Your hubris will be your downfall. Naruto raised a hand again and immediately the spikes dug into the ground in preparation for a Shinra Tensei. However, the gravitation attack never came. Instead, the puppet was unprepared for when Naruto suddenly closed his hand, straining under the massive influx of chakra running through the limb. Kenkiona Jibun. The previously flexible metal tail that hung threateningly over Hiriko suddenly fell as its weight had been quadrupled, which effectively it had. The puppet itself collapsed to the ground, the joints unable to hold up its own weight as the material it was made from began to buckle inwards. It would seem Sasori wasn't defeated though, as the Hiriko puppet suddenly exploded outward, scattering hundreds upon hundreds of S.L.-laced senbon in every possible direction with enough momentum to escape the increased gravitational field. Naruto's eyes widened as he opened his hand again, bringing up his other just in time for the dangerous needles to harmless bounce off an invisible wall of force. Sasori used the release to dash away from the broken remains of his puppet, landing high above Naruto on a tree, Akatsuki cloak fluttering in the breeze. Impressive Kyubi Jinchuriki. The ability to manipulate the very forces of gravity itself is a dangerous one that I will put to good use in the future, however the real fight begins now. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.